it. You have been placing nearly all the blame on the COVID pandemic and the way that the U.S. responded to it squarely with Dr. Fauci. But of course, he worked for President Trump. Does President Trump also deserve some of the blame?
Well, President Trump, as you recall, wanted to end the lockdowns. I think the thing that did the most damage to our country was the lockdowns that shut down 3.5 million businesses in our country with no due process, no just compensation. All of our churches closed our schools, and our children are still paying the price for that. And yet we had the worst outcome of any country in the world.
How so?
We had the highest death rate from COVID of any nation on earth.
Well, let me just say, because I've heard you say that before on the death rate from COVID, it's not accurate because public health experts say that there is a combination of factors that went into that: higher rates of chronic illnesses, which I know you would agree with, gaps to our healthcare system, and misinformation about vaccines.
But you just said what I said was inaccurate. What I said was accurate. We had the highest death rate from COVID of any place.
There are other countries that had higher, but
you can argue
go ahead
about why we had that, but nobody can tell you. I mean, we have, as you say, we have the highest chronic disease burden in the world. But Anthony Fauci was mismanaging the COVID pandemic, and he was doing it under the Biden administration. President Trump wanted to end the lockdowns. And in fact, in Anthony Fauci's diaries, he talks about how President Trump is calling him every day, trying to get him to reopen the country.
Yeah, well, the lockdowns were done by governors. I mean, certainly Anthony Fauci and the president had opinions, but the lockdowns were done by governors, and largely because they were hearing from hospitals saying that their ICUs were overrun and they needed some help while that was happening.
Well, that's not true. That's just not true. What you're saying is not true. No, they were doing it because Anthony Fauci was telling them from the top, you need to lock down. There were ICUs that were empty all over the country, including in New York at the height.
I'm asking you, I'm going to go back to what I asked you at the beginning, which is President Trump. And he was the guy in charge. And you tweeted back in 2024 that he let bureaucrats like Anthony Fauci shut down the entire country. Again, the president was in charge.
The president was trying to reopen the country when he left. The country was kept closed for another year, almost a year and a half after that.
Let's talk about how to prevent the next pandemic, because there's a lot of litigating and relitigating that I don't think is really helpful to do with regard to COVID. And the question is about so-called gain of function, which for people who aren't entirely clear about it, it is a highly risky research process that includes manipulating a virus to study how it behaves as it evolves. Now, what scientists say is that although it's controversial, it's necessary to prepare for the next pandemic, to get ahead of it, to figure out what these viruses can do. You want to end this gain of function research. Some scientists say, isn't it better just to put better guardrails around it?
People have been trying to put guardrails around it for generations, and it hasn't worked. And clearly, COVID-19 pandemic and many other global pandemics that we have come from gain of function research. The RSV epidemic that we have, that is the biggest killer of kids in this country today, came from these kind of experiments. The Lyme disease almost certainly came from this kind of research. So, and the scientists who you say are experts are making the argument that this is necessary for pandemic response, cannot point to one instance in history where research that came out of this kind of experimentation has actually provided us something beneficial.
So how do you prepare then? How do you prepare for the next pandemic? I mean, that's literally part of your job now, because experts think it's going to happen within the next 10 years again.
Yeah, I mean, I think we did virtually everything wrong the last time.
So what about now?
The principal thing that we need to do is we need to listen to what's happening to doctors on the ground. There are 15 million frontline physicians around the world. They're mainly now connected through the internet. We can tell on the front lines what's working and what's not. If we had listened to those doctors during the COVID pandemic, we would have saved potentially millions of lives. There were therapeutics out there that were working. There were doctors that were having no deaths from COVID and treating, in some cases, thousands of patients. And we weren't listening to them. Instead, we were doing the opposite. We were shutting them down. And then, Dana, the other thing that I would say is that we need to protect our constitutional rights. That is the primary obligation of our country. What does that mean? Well, during COVID, we completely dismantled our constitutional rights. We began censoring people in violation of the First Amendment.
But you're saying what not to do. I'm asking what to do. But I want to talk about.
Well, that's something to do. That is the number one priority. We protect the Constitution. The Constitution was written.
Forgive me, but you're talking about rights, and I'm asking about a potential public health crisis that is coming. But I do want to
And one of the mistakes we made in the last time was suppressing those rights so people weren't being heard. The doctors who were saying you're doing it wrong were being marginalized and vilified.
Yeah,
and
because again, I really want to move on, but.
Yeah,
you were saying you were
yes, I do. Part of the problem.
No, I wasn't part of the problem.
There was absolute press malpractice. You weren't allowing your
Mr. Secretary,
your job is a fierce skepticism toward authority, and you weren't doing that. You were beating up on people who were dissenting.
No. Okay, you want to sit here and attack me, or do you want to have conversations about public health? I'm not attacking you. I'm asking questions about how to prevent the next pandemic.
Question, and I'll tell you.
That's what I'm trying to do. But I also don't want to use this interview to allow you to say things that aren't entirely true. You're talking about therapeutics, fine. It is also factually true that the COVID vaccine worked. The COVID vaccine prevented deaths. There is data upon data upon data. Let's talk about the measles, please, because this is something that is happening as we speak. The cases in the U.S.
vaccine protected children?
I think that what I have talked to scientists and doctors about.
Scientists. Can you show me one study?
Yes, I can.
That shows that
I can.
Children were protected by the COVID vaccine.
I can tell you that there are.
That vaccine did more good than harm to children. Can you show me one study that shows that?
I can tell you that when it comes to the vaccine, there have been studies that show that because of vaccine disinformation, there could have been 100 to 200,000 lives in the U.S. saved. But because people didn't get the vaccine, that's why. I'm not saying that it entirely.
You are saying nonsense. You are saying something that you cannot show me a single study.
I am not saying nonsense.
You are talking what somebody told you.
Excuse me.
And you cite me the study. What study?
No, what studies are you talking about? You're talking about studies that actually don't exist. I want to talk about.
Cite me the study that you're talking about.
I am not here to defend.
Studies. Cite me the study.
This is not productive. I am not here to defend all of the. Let me finish.
You're talking nonsense. You're making assertions you can't support, and then when I call you on them, you're telling me that I'm arguing.
Okay. Do you want to talk about assertions that you can't support? I'll get there in a second. Let me just say, for the record, that I am not saying that the entire way that the COVID reaction was accurate. It was a scary time, and people made mistakes. Absolutely.
You were scaring people.
Why are you saying that?
Because that was the job of CNN.
Okay.
Was to put the chyrons up about how many people are dying.
We were trying to we were listening to the leaders in this country, including the president, who had a daily press conference explaining what was going on and trying to listen.
Were you listening?
I want to talk to measles.
Actually, were you reading the science yourself?
The measles cases in the U.S. just reached a 35-year high. The second record-breaking year in a row. 93% of these cases are among the unvaccinated. The outbreak has happened on your watch. And even before becoming HHS secretary, for years, you have been one of the leading voices questioning the efficacy of vaccines. Do you accept some responsibility for this measles outbreak?
Absolutely not. First of all, this is an international outbreak. So, and we're doing better at handling it than any country in the world. Mexico has 15 times the amount of measles per capita that we have. Canada has 4 times the amount of measles. England has 2 times the amount of measles. Did I cause those measles outbreaks?
You're the most famous.
Did I cause 137,000 cases?
You're the most famous vaccine skeptic on the planet.
Let me tell you, because actually Anthony Fauci in his diaries answers the question about why we're having a measles outbreak right now. The reason we're having a measles outbreak because of the COVID lockdowns, because people like children during that period did not get vaccinated. And in his diaries, he says this is going to cause massive outbreaks of measles and more children, he says this, are going to die. Let me finish, because you could accuse me of something. Now, let me.
No, I didn't. I asked you a question.
Yeah, let me give you the answer. He says in his diaries, more children are going to die from measles because of these lockdowns than COVID. So if you want to know, and that age group that should have gotten the MMR when they were 18 months and didn't get it, they're the ones being infected. The people in this country, and we have stopped the outbreaks at record speed in South Carolina, in Texas, in Utah, in Virginia. We've done better than any country in the world. I dispatch immediately the epidemic intelligence services to those states. I get on the phone with the governor and we stop them in their tracks. Nobody else has been able to do that.
You have a bully pulpit.
Let me tell you just one last thing.
Go ahead.
The communities that are suffering from measles are almost all religious communities that just don't vaccinate. The Mennonites have not vaccinated since 1796, since Edward Jenner invented the smallpox vaccine. It's hard to blame that on me as much as you want to blame it on me.
No, I don't want to blame you. I'm asking you because you have a very powerful voice on these issues for people who are skeptical. Let me finish. Let me finish.
And I've never questioned the efficacy of the MMR vaccine.
Okay, let me finish.
What
I want you to do is please use your bully pulpit to right now, as we're getting close to back to school, are you willing to say to parents who have not vaccinated their kids that they should vaccinate their kids for measles because it is safe and it will help them save their children's lives?
We tell people on my websites, my public
right now,
I'll
look
say
into the
it
camera.
right now that parents should get their children vaccinated for measles. A measles vaccine is effective. It stops measles in about 97% of the cases. But people should get vaccinated.
Can I ask you, the Wall Street Journal reported that the president is pressuring you to conduct studies probing the link between vaccines and autism. Is that true?
Did you say probing the link?
I'm just quoting the Wall Street Journal, that the president wants you to go further to probe the link between autism and vaccines.
He certainly does.
Okay. Now, have you talked to him about medical research that have studied this for 25 years and found no link between autism and vaccines? And this is my question here, because I don't want to litigate that. My question is, why not, because you are HHS secretary now, why not study what could cause autism, which scientists do believe starts with fetal brain development? Why not do some studies on that, whether you're an environmental lawyer, whether there are environmental factors that go into contributing to a predisposed genetic situation?
Well, let me say this first. We're doing all those things, and that's one of the ways that we found Tylenol. There's 73 studies out there that link Tylenol exposure during later pregnancy and during the perinatal period to autism onset. But you are wrong when you say that this issue has been studied. It has been studied, and you're rolling your eyes, Dana. But
I am, because I don't want to have you use our air to say this. There have been more than 40 studies involving 5.6 million people to conclude there is no link between vaccines and autism. This is the head of the Committee of Infectious Diseases for the American Academy of Pediatrics.
And now let me tell you what the Institute of Medicine says, which is the National Academy of Sciences, which is the ultimate arbiter on vaccine safety, and which it does not have an interest in this debate. It says that none of the 8 vaccines that are administered during the first 6 months of life have ever been studied for a relationship to autism. It found 2 studies.